Why weren't these individuals, like Senator Graham, like Michael Flynn, not charged if that was the original recommendation?
Well, the report that was unsealed today came from what's known as a special purpose grand jury, and they did not have the power to indict. They investigated for 8 months last year and heard from 75 witnesses, and they essentially made recommendations to the district attorney in Fulton County, Fani Willis, and they recommended more than 36 people should be indicted. In the end, Fani Willis asked for 19 people, including Donald Trump, to be indicted. And the report doesn't say why half of the people were not indicted, but we can only assume that the prosecutors made a strategic decision to not indict half the people that were recommended by the special purpose grand jury because they thought they couldn't carry their burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these people were guilty. And I would just say that beyond Michael Flynn, they also recommended the former senators from Georgia, David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, of course, with Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina Republican senator.
All right, let's move over to New Delhi now, where President Biden met with Indian Prime Minister Modi ahead of the G-20 summit this weekend. They've already sat down together. Bloomberg's Dan Flatley is here with us now for more on that. Dan, this bilateral meeting happened pretty quickly here, but it's actually the folks who are not at the G-20 who are making some news here, the leaders of China and Russia. What kind of opportunity might this open for Joe Biden?
Yeah, that's right, Joe. It's a pretty interesting opportunity for Biden because he's been sort of courting Modi this whole summer, really. I mean, he invited him to Washington to a state dinner. It was a big deal. And obviously this is U.S. trying to counter China, trying to counter Russia as it continues its invasion of Ukraine, and really trying to hold India close. India has not really joined a lot of the measures that the U.S. has imposed, along with some of its European allies, on Russia. But this could be an opportunity for Biden to say to President Modi, hey, let's work a little bit closer together on these issues. Let's think about strategic positioning in the Indo-Pacific region. It's sort of a chance to kind of get somebody that you really want to talk to at a party when the other people aren't there.
According to our reporting, the issue that still remains up for discussion within the communiques, they can't get everyone to sign off on the G-20 in Bali language regarding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which said most countries condemn the war. Right. That's a pretty low bar. Are they going to be able to clear it?
Yeah, I think that, when you run into issues like that, it's a low bar, but it has immense symbolism or a lot of significance beyond what, is actually on the paper. I think that perhaps in the back rooms, there's some opportunities to do some jockeying and try to reach agreement on things you don't necessarily have to come out and announce right away. So you can make some moves that people don't necessarily have to see or you don't have to trumpet or announce while you're sort of, trying to work on some more tougher diplomatic issues that kind of are at the forefront.
And, of course, when you talk about Ukraine, it's not just the language. It's, are they going to be able to continue this funding? The U.S. needs to convince not just the international community, like the Global South, that they should be funding and supporting Ukraine, but also congressmen and women back home. Isn't the Ukraine funding a big part of this budget fight, Kate, we're about to see?
It is. I mean, there are so many issues that are on the horizon now. When the House comes back next week, we're going to see fights over Ukraine funding. We're going to see fights over funding the federal government. We're, looking ahead at maybe a shutdown in a couple of weeks. And so these are all these very contentious issues where you have people in both parties just on polar opposites. So this is going to be a really, really contentious week ahead. It could be that some of these fault lines and lines of division become more clear. I spent a lot of time this week talking to lobbyists, business lobbyists, and they are all preparing for a government shutdown. They're preparing their clients. They're telling federal government contractors, get your bills in now. Make sure you've got your work orders and all of that done this month before a possible shutdown would happen, as of October 1st. So that's, there's not the people who kind of watch this process. They're not expecting, where this is just going to come together very quickly. But, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Kate, we spoke with Republican Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis of New York yesterday about a potential shutdown. Here's what she said.
Shutdown can be avoided. Is it probable? I don't know at this point. I really can't say. I think that, unfortunately, there are some within my own party that are digging their heels in, saying they want to shut down regardless, and they'll never be happy, really, with anything. They don't understand art of compromise, and I think that's the real difference between those Republicans and some others. They need to understand that we don't control the government right now. The Democrats control 2/3 of the pie.
Reminding us yet again that this is not just a battle between the White House and the Hill or between the House and the Senate, but within the Republican Party in the House
same
itself,
for the Democrats,
isn't it?
too, but big time for the Republicans.
Yeah. That inter-party fight has a long way to go before it's resolved.
Yeah, and there are a lot of outside stakeholders that are putting pressure on members of Congress. You've got conservative groups that are pushing the more conservative Republicans, don't take any kind of a deal, throw a wrench into it as much as you can. And then on the other side, you have liberal groups that are really leaning on Senate Democrats, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, sending them letters and saying, don't cave, don't throw in the towel, stick to the debt ceiling deal that was brokered earlier this year. So you just have a lot of competing pressures, both internally inside their parties and also externally.
David, just to bring you back into this conversation and get back where we started here, we're talking about a timeline for a potential shutdown. We're also questioning the timing of trials for Donald Trump, because it's going to be an interesting balancing act here for everybody involved here. Do we have a sense on a start date for the first trial for Donald Trump? You're talking about Georgia. They've suggested as early as October, but that's not likely to happen, right? The special counsel will likely get his trial rolling first. What's your view?
It does seem like the special counsel trials will probably go first. There is a trial date of October 23rd that's been set for two of Trump's co-defendants in Georgia, Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro, and that would give a preview of the evidence against Trump and the others in Georgia. But he's certainly going to have a very crowded year in court while he's trying to campaign, because 3 of the 4 trials have been set, and the 4th should be set soon. And he's going to need to be in court to defend himself. So it's going to cause some tremendous logistical problems for him as a candidate, assuming that those trials are not rescheduled.